The veil slipped from my head, not just as fabric, but as a flag of surrender. On what should have been the happiest day of my life, my groom's fist answered an accusation I didn't deserve. His mother's lies stole my dignity, but what they didn't know was this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of their downfall.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is a powerful tale of betrayal, heartbreak, and the sweetest form of revenge. It's about a bride accused of theft at her own wedding, humiliated in front of everyone she loved, only to rise stronger, sharper, and unbreakable. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most, this story will grip you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss these incredible stories.
The sound of his fist connecting with my face didn't just echo in my skull. It shattered the illusion of the life I thought I was stepping into. For a split second, the ballroom was frozen in silence. Then, like a glass dropped from too high, everything broke at once. The music stopped mid-note, the violinists lowered their bows, and every guest sucked in a horrified gasp. I remember the clink of a champagne flute tipping over somewhere, the liquid spreading across white linen like spilled blood, and then my veil, so carefully pinned, so symbolic of purity and promise, slipped from my head. It didn't float gracefully, it dropped, limp and defeated, pulling at my feet like a flag of surrender. I had dreamed of that day for years. The flowers, the aisle, the vows we were supposed to exchange under the blessing of God and family. It was meant to be the beginning of forever. Instead, it became the ending of something I had never truly seen for what it was. And it ended not with words, but with the sting of betrayal pressed against my cheek, the metallic taste of blood blooming in my mouth. All around me, people whispered. The guests weren't celebrating anymore. They were spectators at my downfall. I heard muffled voices. Did you see that? My God, he hit her. What did she do? Their judgment tangled with the sound of my heartbeat, which thudded like a war drum inside my chest. And then came her voice, his mother. She stood tall, trembling with outrage that looked rehearsed rather than real. Her finger, rigid and accusing, cut through the air like the gavel of a judge. "She stole my emerald ring," she declared, her voice slicing through the silence. Her words carried weight, not because they were true, but because they fell from her mouth with the authority of someone who had already decided my fate. I turned to him, my husband-to-be, my supposed protector. His eyes, which had once looked at me with warmth, now blazed with disgust. There was no hesitation, no searching for truth, no question of my innocence. He didn't even blink. He growled, "Return it immediately, or the wedding is off."
I couldn't move at first. My lips parted, but the words tangled in my throat. I was drowning, suffocated by disbelief. Finally, I whispered, my voice soft and calm, though my body trembled. I didn't take her emerald ring. My words were not just a plea for understanding. They were a plea for him to see me, to know me, to believe me. But he didn't. He wouldn't. Whether he couldn't hear me or simply didn't care, I'll never know. His answer wasn't spoken. It was delivered in the form of his fist, swift and merciless. The pain was sharp, sudden, blinding. I stumbled, collapsing to the floor, my white dress spreading around me like a broken promise. The taste of blood filled my mouth, coppery and bitter, mingling with the bitter truth. I was marrying a man who chose his mother's lies over my dignity. The priest closed his book and stepped back, his lips pressed into a tight line. The symbolism was suffocating. My vows dissolved before they could be spoken. The guests averted their eyes, but not before their whispers filled the air like smoke. The flowers, once bright and full of life, seemed to wilt under the silence that blanketed the hall. That moment should have broken me. It should have crushed every piece of me, left me in ruins. But even as I sat there on the cold marble floor, my cheek swelling, my veil discarded, something inside me shifted. My tears didn't fall. My voice didn't scream. Instead, An eerie stillness crept into me. Humiliation is a strange thing. It burns hot at first, like fire licking at your pride. But if you sit with it long enough, it cools into something harder, sharper, like steel forged in flames. I realized then that his fist, his betrayal, his mother's venomous accusations were not just the end of a wedding, they were the end of an illusion I had been clinging to.
The illusion that he loved me unconditionally. The illusion that family meant loyalty. The illusion that love could blind hatred. As I sat there, my vision blurred, I thought of the man I had fallen for. The man who had once held my hand with such gentleness, who had promised me safety, who had laughed in ways that made me forget the world's cruelty. How had he transformed so completely into this stranger who struck me down without hesitation? Or perhaps he hadn't transformed at all. Perhaps this was who he had always been, and I had simply refused to see it. His mother's eyes bored into me as though she had won a battle she had been planning for months. In truth, she had. She had destroyed the wedding, tainted my reputation, and turned her son against me. But as she stared, expecting tears, expecting me to beg or confess, she didn't see what was truly forming inside me. Not despair, not defeat, but resolve. Because in that moment, amid the blood, the whispers, and the ruined flowers, I realized something chilling. He hadn't been defending her. He had been waiting for an excuse, waiting for an opportunity to justify what his heart had already decided, that I was disposable. And once that truth settled in, I no longer felt broken. I felt free. When the priest walked away, when the guests avoided my gaze, when his mother sneered with satisfaction, I did not fight back. I stayed silent. My silence was not weakness. It was my first step. They thought my quiet was surrender, but silence can be sharper than any blade. It buys time. It allows wounds to harden into scars, scars into armor. I rose slowly, not with the trembling desperation of a woman begging for forgiveness, but with the calm of someone who had just seen her enemy's cards laid bare. My veil remained on the ground. I did not pick it up. I walked past the whispers, past the flowers that no longer smelled sweet, past the man who had once been my entire future. They thought they had destroyed me that day, but all they had done was awaken me. And though my wedding ended in blood and humiliation, my story had only just begun. Before the blood, before the humiliation, before his mother's lies echoed like gospel in that crowded hall, there was love. Or at least what I thought was love. Looking back now, it feels like a story I once told myself. A carefully woven fairy tale stitched together with promises and laughter that, at the time, felt unbreakable. I met him on one of those ordinary days that somehow become extraordinary in hindsight. I was at a cafe downtown, the kind where the aroma of roasted beans clings to your clothes, and the quiet hum of conversation creates a cocoon around you. My hands were full of papers from work, scattered across the table in a chaotic mess. I remember cursing under my breath when my pen rolled off the table. He was the one who picked it up. "Careful," he said, handing it back to me. His smile was disarming, warm, the kind that sneaks past your defenses before you even realize you're vulnerable. He had a way of leaning in just slightly when he spoke, like every word you said mattered to him. That was the beginning. We talked about nothing. Weather, books, the terrible coffee at the cafe. But beneath the small talk, I felt something click. It wasn't thunder or lightning, not love at first sight, but a steady current pulling me closer. By the time he asked for my number, I didn't hesitate. And when he called that evening, I found myself smiling into the phone in a way I hadn't in years. Our first dates were simple, unpretentious. Walks in the park, late-night drives with the windows down, greasy diner food at midnight. He was charming, but not in an over-rehearsed way. He listened, really listened. When I told him about my mother's death, he didn't just nod. He squeezed my hand and stayed silent,
Like his silence was making space for my grief. That silence felt safe back then. He made me laugh too. God, his laugh, it was contagious. The kind of laugh that bubbled out of him, full and unapologetic, until you couldn't help but join in. I remember one night, standing in the rain after our car broke down, both of us drenched, hair plastered to our faces. He wrapped his jacket around me, even though he was shivering, and said, "At least now you'll never forget me." We laughed until our stomachs hurt. I didn't know then how prophetic those words would be.
In those early months, he was protective, not controlling, not yet protective. He'd walk me to my car, check if I'd locked my doors, make sure I texted him when I got home safe. It felt good to be cared for, to feel like someone was looking out for me. After years of carrying everything on my own, I leaned into it. When he said, "I'll always stand by you," I believed him. Why wouldn't I? His promises stitched themselves into my skin like embroidery, each thread reinforcing the tapestry of a future I thought we were weaving together. I imagined a home with him, kids, holidays, a life where safety wasn't just a dream, but a reality wrapped around me in his arms. But love, I would learn, is often blind. And sometimes what feels like protection is the first shadow of possession. Sometimes laughter hides manipulation. Sometimes promises are not stitches, they're shackles. The first crack appeared so subtly, I almost convinced myself it wasn't there. A missed call he couldn't explain. "Work," he said, brushing it off with that same charming smile. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. After all, he had been nothing but good to me. Then there was the perfume. I noticed it one night when he came to pick me up. Not mine, not familiar. A scent that clung to his shirt like a whisper I wasn't supposed to hear. I asked. He laughed it off. "Probably from the office," he said, kissing my forehead. I wanted to argue, but instead I swallowed my doubts, convinced myself love meant trust. And then there was his mother. From the beginning, her eyes followed me with suspicion, as though she had already decided I was guilty of something. She asked questions that weren't really questions, like, "So what exactly do you do again? Are you sure you're ready to be a wife?" Each one dripping with disdain, as if I needed her approval stamped on my forehead to exist. I tried. I smiled, I brought her flowers, complimented her cooking, endured the barbed comments she slipped into conversations like poison. He never defended me. At first, I told myself he was just caught in the middle, that it wasn't fair to ask him to choose. But in the silence that followed her venom, I heard the truth. He was choosing. He just wasn't choosing me. Still, I pushed the doubts aside. Love, I told myself, was enough. Love would weather the storms, heal the cracks, smooth the edges. I clung to that belief. Even as the cracks spread deeper, even as his mother's whispers grew louder, even as the perfume lingered on his clothes, I wanted to believe in the man from the cafe, the man who picked up my pen and handed it back with a smile, the man who wrapped me in his jacket in the rain, the man whose laugh made me forget the weight of grief for a moment. I told myself that man was still there, buried beneath the shadows. But love, I would learn, isn't about holding on to the person they were. It's about seeing who they are becoming. And the man he was becoming was not the man I thought I loved. When he slipped the ring on my finger and asked me to be his wife, I said yes, without hesitation. I saw forever in his eyes. What I didn't see was the storm waiting at the altar, the betrayal festering beneath the vows we had yet to speak, because love blinded me, and blindness cost me everything. Every love story has its cracks, but most of the time we choose to paint over them, convincing ourselves the surface is strong enough to hold. That's what I did. I picked up my brush of excuses and painted over every jagged line, every unsettling detail, until the picture looked perfect again. But no amount of paint can hide a foundation that's crumbling. It started with the missed calls. At first, they were small, explainable. He'd be late to dinner because of a meeting that ran over. His phone would ring in the middle of the night, and he'd step out of the room to answer, saying it was work. I wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. After all, he was the man who had once gone out of his way to make me feel safe. Surely he wouldn't lie to me. Surely love meant transparency. But there were shadows in his eyes when I asked questions. He would look away too quickly, change the subject,
or pull me into his arms as though affection was a substitute for truth. Sometimes he would laugh it off, kiss my forehead, and whisper, "You worry too much," and I would believe him, because it was easier than facing the possibility that my instincts were right. Then came the perfume. That night is still sharp in my memory. The way he leaned in to kiss me hello, the faint floral scent clinging to his shirt, it wasn't mine. It wasn't familiar. It was someone else's. My heart twisted, but when I asked, he chuckled, brushing my cheek with his thumb. "Probably from the office," he said, as though perfume could just float through the air and attach itself to him. I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but instead, I swallowed my suspicion. Fighting would have meant admitting something was wrong, and I wasn't ready to admit that. The cracks widened further when his mother became involved. She had always regarded me with thinly veiled disdain, but her disapproval grew sharper as the wedding drew closer. She would corner me in the kitchen during family dinners, her words coated with sweetness that stung like poison. "Are you sure you know how to cook what he likes?" she'd ask, her eyebrows arching, as though I'd already failed as a wife.
"You don't seem very traditional," she'd say another time, her lips curling into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. Each comment was a test I could never pass. I tried to win her over. Flowers, compliments, small gestures, but nothing softened her eyes. They stayed cold, assessing, searching for flaws. She wasn't just suspicious of me, she despised me. And the worst part? He never defended me. When I told him how she treated me, he would shrug. "That's just how she is. Don't take it personally." But how could I not? Every word she spoke chipped away at my confidence, at my place in his life. And each time he stayed silent, each time he let her words stand unchallenged, I realized something painful. He wasn't caught in the middle. He was choosing sides, and it wasn't mine. Still, I held on. I told myself he was stressed, that weddings brought out the worst in families, that once we were married, things would settle. Love, I thought, was supposed to weather storms. But sometimes, love isn't an umbrella. Sometimes it's the lightning that splits the sky. The arguments began small, but sharp. He started coming home later, offering flimsy excuses. If I pressed too hard, his temper would flare. Not physical, not then, but a tone, a sharpness in his voice that hadn't been there before. He would accuse me of being paranoid, of not trusting him enough, and I would apologize, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I was so desperate to keep the peace that I silenced myself. The wedding preparations became another battlefield. I wanted small and intimate. His mother insisted on grand and traditional. He sided with her every time. When I suggested compromises, his response was always the same. "She's my mother. Don't make me choose." But he had already chosen. He always chose her. The more I tried to hold things together, the more they slipped through my fingers. The man who once wrapped me in his jacket in the rain now left me standing in the storm alone. The man who once made me laugh until I cried now made me cry until I couldn't breathe. There was one night, a week before the wedding, when I almost walked away. We were arguing in his car, parked outside my apartment. I had found a receipt in his jacket, 2 glasses of wine, dinner for 2, at a restaurant we had never been to together. My voice shook as I held it up. "Who were you with?" I asked. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he would confess. Instead, he snatched the receipt from my hand, crumpled it, and tossed it aside. "You don't trust me," he said, his tone icy. "If you can't even believe me, maybe this wedding shouldn't happen." The words cut deep, and yet, instead of standing my ground, I begged him to understand, begged him not to walk away. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe it was work, maybe it was nothing. I convinced myself that if I just held on a little tighter, things would return to the way they were. But deep down, I knew. The cracks weren't surface scratches anymore. They were fault lines, splitting wider with every passing day, and still I plastered over them,
painted them with hope, convinced myself that the foundation could hold. Because love makes fools of us. It blinds us to the truth staring us in the face. And I was blind. So blind, I walked straight toward the altar, ignoring the warning signs, ignoring the voice in my head that whispered I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't know then that the cracks weren't just in our relationship. They were in him, in his loyalty, in his love. And soon, those cracks would collapse entirely, burying me beneath their weight.
Weddings are supposed to be about love, about two people stepping into a future together, about families uniting, about celebration. But on my wedding day, love was nowhere to be found. Instead, venom dripped from the lips of the woman who was supposed to become my family, her mother. From the very beginning, she had been a storm brewing at the edges of our relationship. Her smile never quite reached her eyes, and her words always carried a sharp edge, disguised as concern. But on that day, her storm hit full force. The ceremony had been carefully choreographed, every flower placed, every ribbon tied, every candle lit. I walked down the aisle with my heart pounding, not with doubt, not yet, but with nervous excitement. I told myself the cracks I'd been ignoring would fade once we said, "I do." I convinced myself that the weight of a ring on his finger would bind him to me, protect me from the whispers, shield me from her gaze. But the truth is, no vow could ever silence her. She had been watching me all day, her eyes following every movement, every smile, every breath. And then, in one carefully calculated moment, she struck. She stole my emerald ring. Her voice sliced through the air, shrill and certain. Guests gasped, the music faltered, and the priest hesitated mid-blessing. Time froze, and in that suspended moment, I felt the floor give way beneath me. I looked at her, stunned. The audacity of her words left me breathless. I hadn't touched her ring. I hadn't even seen it. But she didn't care about truth. She cared about power. And in that instant, she wielded it like a weapon. Her finger pointed at me, long and trembling with indignation. To the crowd, it looked like the gesture of a wronged woman defending her honor. To me, it felt like the dagger she had been sharpening for months finally plunged into my back. I turned to him, my groom, my love, my supposed partner. This was the moment he should have stood by me, should have defended me, should have silenced the poison dripping from his mother's mouth. But instead, I saw disgust in his eyes. Not doubt, not confusion, disgust. Without hesitation, he believed her. "Return it immediately," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "or the wedding is off." The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I could hear their whispers, feel their judgment crawling across my skin. My chest tightened, and my throat burned as I tried to speak. "I didn't take her emerald ring," I whispered, my voice calm despite the chaos inside me. It wasn't just a denial, it was a plea. A plea for him to see me, to remember me, to know who I was. But he didn't. Or maybe he chose not to, because the very next moment, his fist collided with my face. The gasps around us became a chorus, echoing through the hall like the sound of shattering glass. I stumbled, my vision blurring, my veil slipping from my head. The room tilted as I crumpled to the floor, white fabric pooling around me like a broken promise. His mother's face was triumphant. She had orchestrated the scene perfectly, her son striking me down in her defense, the priest walking away, the guests whispering their agreement. She had painted me as the villain, and he had delivered the final stroke. But what she didn't see, what none of them saw, was that beneath the humiliation, beneath the sting of betrayal, something inside me shifted. Humiliation is her weapon, I realized. Lies are her weapon. But silence could be mine. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I didn't even argue. I let them believe what they wanted. I let them whisper their judgments, let them shake their heads in disapproval, because silence buys time, and time buys clarity. As I sat on the cold marble floor, the taste of blood on my tongue, I realized something terrifyingly clear. She had given him the excuse he had been waiting for. The cracks in our foundation weren't caused by her. They had simply been revealed by her. He wanted a reason to break me, and she handed it to him. I thought of all the small betrayals that had led us here. The perfume, the missed calls, the dinners he never explained. I thought of the nights I convinced myself love was enough. I thought of the ring she now accused me of stealing. And I wondered if it was already on another woman's finger. Because lies that bold don't come from nowhere. They're born from secrets, from truths too dangerous to face. When the priest walked away, his book closed tight, the ceremony was over. But for me, something new had begun. His mother thought she had won. She thought she had destroyed me, humiliated me beyond repair, left me broken and powerless. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that her accusation had done the opposite. She hadn't broken me, she had freed me. The veil lay discarded at my feet, the flowers wilted, the music silenced. My wedding had ended before it began, but as I rose from the floor, bruised but unbowed, I knew this wasn't my ending. It was hers. It was his. And I would be the one to write it. After the wedding collapsed into chaos, after the priest walked away and the whispers filled the air like smoke, I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't even cry. I sat there, blood drawing on my lips, and chose silence. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't shock. It was strategy. Silence is misunderstood. People think it means surrender, that quietness is the mark of defeat. But I learned something in that moment. Silence is sharper than any blade. It buys time. It blinds your enemies. It makes them think they've already won, and when they believe they've destroyed you, they stop watching. That's when you strike. So, I let them celebrate my downfall. His mother smirked, satisfied with her victory. She whispered to the guests, weaving her lies into a narrative that painted me as a thief, a liar, a disgrace. He stood beside her, shoulders stiff, fists still clenched, as though striking me hadn't been enough. I saw the way he avoided my eyes, the way his jaw tightened. He didn't want to face me, not because he doubted her story, but because some part of him knew. He knew he had gone too far. I gave them nothing. No denial, no outburst, no defense. I walked out of that hall with my head held high, my silence louder than any words I could have spoken. They thought I was broken. They thought I was humiliated beyond repair. They thought I had surrendered. But inside, I was calculating. That night, alone in my room, I replayed every moment. Her accusation, his disgust, the strike of his fist. I replayed it until the anger burned hotter than the humiliation, until the pain hardened into resolve. And then I realized something chilling. He had been waiting for an excuse. The ring wasn't the problem. The lie wasn't the reason. He had wanted a reason to cast me aside, to frame me, to paint himself as the betrayed one. His mother had handed him the perfect opportunity, but opportunities reveal truths, and the truth was simple. He was not the man I thought I loved. He never was. So I stopped crying. The first step was silence. I didn't confront him. I didn't argue with his mother. I let them think their poison had worked. Because when someone thinks you're defeated, they let their guard down. They speak freely. They reveal their secrets. And that's exactly what I needed. I remembered the perfume, that floral scent that didn't belong to me, clinging to his shirt like evidence. At the time, I had buried my suspicion under excuses. But now, with clarity burning through me, I knew the truth. There was someone else. So I dug. Quietly, carefully. I searched through his things, through his messages, through the little corners of his life he thought I would never see. And I found her. A waitress, young, naive, the kind of girl who still believed promises whispered in the dark. She was everything I had once been, everything I had once believed in. And she talked. Oh, how she talked. Over coffee, she spilled every secret he had given her, every promise he had once given me. He had told her she was his future, that he would leave me, that she was the one. He had used the same words, the same tone, as though love were nothing but a script he repeated to every woman who would listen. And then she showed me. On her finger, glinting under the cafe lights, was the emerald ring. His mother's emerald ring, the very ring I had been accused of stealing. He had given it to her, slipped it onto her hand with the same false tenderness he had once used with me. The first step was silence. I didn't confront him. I didn't argue with his mother. I let them think their poison had worked. Because when someone thinks you're defeated, They let their guard down. They speak freely. They reveal their secrets. And that's exactly what I needed. I remembered the perfume, that floral scent that didn't belong to me, clinging to his shirt like evidence. At the time, I had buried my suspicion under excuses. But now, with clarity burning through me, I knew the truth. There was someone else. So I dug, quietly, carefully. I searched through his things, through his messages, through the little corners of his life he thought I would never see. And I found her, a waitress. Young, naive, the kind of girl who still believed promises whispered in the dark. She was everything I had once been, everything I had once believed in, and she talked. Oh, how she talked. Over coffee, she spilled every secret he had given her, every promise he had once given me. He had told her she was his future, that he would leave me, that she was the one. He had used the same words, the same tone, as though love were nothing but a script he repeated to every woman who would listen. And then she showed me. On her finger, glinting under the cafe lights, was the emerald ring, his mother's emerald ring, the very ring I had been accused of stealing. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was theatrical. His mother had accused me of theft, while her son was parading that very ring on another woman's hand. The humiliation they had inflicted on me was built on their own lies, and that, I realized, was my weapon. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I gathered evidence. Pictures, messages, recordings of his mistress bragging about her emerald, proof that would silence every whisper, every lie, every accusation, proof that would tear apart the facade he and his mother had built. But silence remained my shield. I didn't tell anyone what I knew. I smiled politely when neighbors asked about the wedding. I ignored the pitying looks from friends who had heard the rumors. I let them think I was licking my wounds in private, because silence was buying me time. Time to build my case, time to prepare my trap, time to turn their lies into their destruction. And as I sat in my room at night, the documents neatly stacked in a folder beside me, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in months. The kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from certainty. They thought they had ended me, but all they had done was sharpen me. The day would come when my silence would end, when my voice would cut through their lives like a blade. And when it did, they wouldn't just lose me, they would lose everything. Because I wasn't just planning revenge, I was planning justice. And justice, I knew, was best served cold.
The truth hides in plain sight, waiting for the moment someone brave enough comes to lift the veil. I had spent months blind, convincing myself that love was enough, that the cracks in our relationship were nothing more than stress and circumstance. But after the humiliation at the altar, after the sting of his fist, my blindness was cured. Now, I saw everything. The emerald ring was my compass, leading me to the truth he thought I'd never find. His mother had weaponized it against me, but she didn't know that the same jewel would unravel their lies. And unravel it did. I started with whispers. People talk, especially in small circles, especially when scandal lingers in the air. I didn't fight the rumors. I listened. Each whispered conversation, each pitying look, each raised eyebrow led me closer to what I was searching for. And soon, a name surfaced, a place, a girl. She worked at a diner, a waitress, young, bright-eyed, too young to know the difference between love and manipulation, too young to recognize recycled promises dressed as sincerity. I found her on a rainy afternoon, sitting in the back of the diner during her break, sipping a soda with tired eyes. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, there was hesitation, like she knew exactly who I was, like she had been warned about me. But I smiled. I didn't accuse. I didn't shout. I sat across from her and spoke softly, gently. "He gave you something, didn't he?" Her eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. I knew then I was right. She wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. With trembling fingers, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, the emerald gleamed, cruel and beautiful under the dull diner lights. My breath caught, not because of its beauty, but because of the vindication it represented. The very ring I had been accused of stealing sat there, proof of their lies, of their betrayal.
"He told me it was his mother's," she whispered, her voice shaking. "He said he wanted me to have it, that one day I'd wear it as his wife." The words hit me like shards of glass. Not because they surprised me, but because they confirmed what I already knew. His love was never mine alone.
I had been nothing more than a placeholder, a stage on which he played out his charade until someone else caught his eye. But this girl, she talked. Oh, how she talked. She told me about the nights they spent together, the dinners he paid for with money meant for our future, the promises he made in the same tender tone he had once used with me. He had told her she was special, unique, irreplaceable, the same lies he had whispered to me under the glow of city lights. And the more she spoke, the clearer it became. I wasn't his first victim. I wouldn't be his last. I listened, patient, recording every detail in the quiet corners of my memory. But memory wasn't enough. I needed evidence. So I pressed gently, guiding the conversation until she revealed more. Texts, pictures, recordings. She had them all, tucked away in her phone like trophies, and she was eager to share them. Eager to prove that she was the one he truly loved. Little did she know, she was handing me the very ammunition I needed to destroy him. That night, I went home with proof. Screenshots of messages where he promised her the world, photos of them together, his arm around her waist, the emerald ring glinting on her finger, recordings of her voice bragging about how he'd chosen her over me, about how his mother adored her, about how I had been nothing more than an obstacle. Every piece of evidence was another brick in the case I was building. But I didn't act immediately. No, silence was still my weapon, and patience was my ally. I organized the evidence, labeled every file, tucked it neatly into folders that painted the picture of betrayal in high definition. I contacted a lawyer, sliding the proof across the desk with steady hands. He raised his eyebrows as he flipped through the files, impressed by the meticulousness of my work. "You've got him," he said simply, and I knew he was right. But I wasn't satisfied with just legal revenge. I wanted him to feel what I had felt: humiliation, betrayal, loss. I wanted him to know what it meant to have the ground ripped out from beneath your feet, to choke on the bitter taste of truth. So I waited. I let him think I had disappeared, licking my wounds in silence. I ignored his calls, his messages that shifted from anger to guilt to desperation. I stayed quiet while he unraveled, while the mistress he had so carelessly flaunted began to grow restless, because she too was starting to see the cracks in his promises. And then, one morning, I got the message I had been waiting for. "The ring is gone," he said, his voice trembling through the phone. "She took it! She took the money too! Please, I need you!" The irony almost made me laugh. The same man who had struck me down at the altar, who had believed his mother's lies without question, who had discarded me like trash, now came crawling back, begging for the very loyalty he had shattered. I smiled into the phone, though he couldn't see it. My silence had paid off. The truth had revealed itself, louder than any accusation I could have made. And now the real game could begin, because the mistress was gone, the ring was gone, and the lies were unraveling faster than he could patch them. And I held the proof that would bury him once and for all. The silence had served its purpose. Now it was time to speak. The emerald ring had been the spark, but what I uncovered afterward was the fire. The mistress had handed me everything I needed, but I knew that if I wanted to truly destroy him, not just leave him, not just embarrass him, but dismantle his entire facade, I needed more than whispered confessions and blurry screenshots. I needed evidence so airtight it would suffocate him. And so I became meticulous, cold, calculated. Every day after work, I slipped into a new role: investigator. By day, I smiled politely to neighbors who whispered about my scandal, but by night,
I sifted through files, saved recordings, and pieced together a timeline so detailed it would make any detective proud. The first layer of proof was the mistress herself. She thought she was bragging, thought she was flaunting her new status as his real partner. What she didn't realize was that every word spilling from her lips was a dagger I could twist into him later. I met her 3 times. Each time, she gave me more. Voice notes of him whispering about how he loved her more than he ever loved me. Pictures of them in restaurants I had never been invited to, hotels that had been booked under fake names. Even text messages where he mocked me. "She'll never see it coming," one read. "She's too desperate to leave." I saved them all. The second layer came from his finances. Betrayal leaves a trail, and I was determined to follow it. I knew enough about his habits to find the breadcrumbs. Bank statements tucked carelessly into drawers, credit card bills left on his desk. I scanned every line, every charge, and there it was. Lavish dinners, jewelry stores, hotel bookings. Purchases that didn't fit into the life we were supposed to be building together. I photographed them, filed them neatly, and attached them to the growing collection of evidence that screamed louder than any denial I could make. The third layer was his mother. Her venom had been the catalyst for my humiliation, but even she wasn't untouchable. She thought she was clever, pointing her finger at me, orchestrating my downfall. But arrogance breeds mistakes. I remembered the smug way she had whispered about how a real wife wouldn't question her husband. I remembered the conversations she had in rooms where she didn't think I was listening, boasting to friends about how she had convinced him to keep me in line. One night, I planted a recorder in her sitting room. I shouldn't have needed to, but I did. And it worked. Her voice, sharp and bitter, spilled into the microphone. She spoke of how she had always wanted me gone, how she couldn't stand me from the moment she laid eyes on me, how she convinced her son that I was unworthy. I told him she'd ruin his life, she hissed in one recording. Better to strike now before she thinks she owns him. Those words became gold, because with them, I could prove that the accusation at the wedding hadn't been truth, it had been strategy. The fourth layer was him. I knew he'd reach out eventually. And he did. His messages shifted like tides, at first cold and furious, then guilty, then desperate. "Please answer. I made a mistake. We can fix this." I didn't respond. I let him unravel, but I kept everything. Every text, every voicemail, every stuttered apology he left at 3 a.m. The same hands that had struck me at the altar now typed frantic messages begging me to come back. His desperation became part of my case. And then I crafted the weapon. With the help of my lawyer, I assembled it all. Screenshots of his infidelity, voice recordings of her bragging, bank statements showing his betrayals in dollars and cents, recordings of his mother admitting her manipulation, his own words, messages soaked with desperation and guilt. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. And when I stepped back to look at it, the picture was devastating. It wasn't just proof of betrayal, it was proof of character. Proof of who he truly was behind the polished smile and charming laugh. The lawyer flipped through the file, whistling softly. "You've got him cornered. Job, reputation, assets. He won't walk away from this intact." That was exactly the point. But for me, it wasn't just about the divorce. It wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about taking back what they had tried to strip from me. Because humiliation burns hottest when it's public. They had humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. Now it was their turn. I began planning the confrontation. It had to be perfect. It had to hit like a blade to the chest. I imagined his face when I placed the emerald ring on the table between us. I imagined his mother's silence when she realized her lies were recorded. I imagined their collapse. And through it all, I felt nothing but clarity. No sadness, no longing, no regret. Because they thought I had been the thief. But the truth was I was the one holding the receipts, the evidence, the proof that would rob them of everything they had left. Justice was no longer a dream. It was inevitable. And all it took was silence,
patience, and the meticulous gathering of truths they thought I'd never uncover. The silence had lasted long enough. I had built my case piece by piece, each shard of truth sharper than the last. But before I could deliver the final blow, fate decided to lend me a hand. His carefully constructed world began to collapse on its own, and all I had to do was watch. It started with the mistress. The young waitress who once flaunted the emerald ring like it was proof of her victory had vanished. One morning, she simply disappeared. The diner manager said she never showed up for her shift. Her neighbors claimed they hadn't seen her in days. And he, my so-called groom, was in a panic. At first, I didn't know why. Then I got the call. His voice trembled through the line, breaking apart like glass under pressure. "The ring! It's gone!" he stammered. "She took it! She took the money, too!" For a moment, I said nothing. I let his desperation fill the silence. I imagine him pacing the floor, running his hands through his hair, realizing that the mistress who once felt like his escape had become his downfall. And then he said the words I had been waiting to hear. "Please, I need you." There it was. The man who had struck me in front of 100 witnesses, who had believed his mother's venom without hesitation, who had left me bleeding in my wedding dress, now came crawling back begging for the loyalty he had destroyed. I almost laughed. Almost. But instead, I smiled into the phone and said calmly, "Come over, we'll talk." By the time he arrived, he looked nothing like the man I once loved. His shoulders slumped, his eyes bloodshot, his movements jittery. He wasn't the confident, protective man from the cafe. He wasn't the charming fiancé who promised me forever. He was smaller now, defeated, desperate. I invited him in with a politeness that must have unsettled him. He expected anger, accusations, tears. Instead, I offered him tea and guided him to the living room. On the table sat a small velvet box. The moment he saw it, he froze. His throat tightened, his fists clenched. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Where did you get that?" I leaned forward, my gaze steady, my voice calm. "Your mistress gave it to me." The color drained from his face. He sat back, stunned into silence, and then, with deliberate slowness, I slid the box closer to him. "She told me everything about you, about the lies, about how you used me." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not arrogance. Fear. I opened the folder beside me and laid it out piece by piece. Screenshots of his texts, photos of him with her, recordings of her bragging about the emerald ring, his mother's voice captured on tape, plotting my humiliation. Each document, each file, was another nail in the coffin of his carefully curated life. "This," I said coldly, "is proof. Proof you framed me, proof your mother destroyed me with your help, proof that when you hit me, you weren't protecting her, you were hiding yourself." He tried to speak, but the words crumbled in his throat. He reached out, desperate to grab the papers, but I pulled them back. "No," I said firmly, "you don't get to rewrite the story. Not this time." I explained what would happen next, my voice steady, sharp as steel. The lawsuit was already in motion. The divorce papers drafted, his career, his reputation, his finances, all of it was about to unravel. "You'll lose your job," I told him, "your reputation. And when this is done, you'll lose every penny you tried to keep from me." His eyes filled with panic. "Please," he begged, his voice breaking. "I made a mistake. I shouldn't have hit you. I was angry. I was scared. But I love you. Stop." I cut in, my voice ice. "You don't get to call it love. Love doesn't humiliate. Love doesn't strike. Love doesn't hand you over to the wolves because it's easier than standing beside you." For once, he was silent, and in that silence, I saw the weight of his collapse settle over him, the realization that he had destroyed himself, and I had only helped him see it. As he sat there, broken, I felt no pity, no longing, no sadness, only release, because his world was crumbling, and I wasn't trapped in it anymore. I was free. When he left that night, his steps were heavy, His shoulders hunched. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a single evening. And for the first time, I felt no need to chase, no need to fix, no need to forgive. I closed the door behind him, slid the bolt into place, and breathed deeply. The silence that followed wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't a weapon, it was peace. He thought I had been the thief, but in the end, it was his own lies, his own arrogance, his own betrayal that had stolen everything from him, and I had only returned the favor. There are moments in life that feel like theater, scenes so heavy with irony and revelation that you almost expect applause when the curtain falls. That night with him, the emerald box resting on the table between us, was one of those moments. He had come crawling back to me, desperate and broken, his world already beginning to collapse. But I hadn't shown him everything yet. I had saved the climax for last. The small velvet box sat in the middle of the table, its presence louder than either of us could bear. He stared at it like it contained his entire life, his salvation, his ruin. His hands twitched, wanting to reach for it, but he didn't dare. Finally, he broke the silence. "Please," he whispered, his voice raw. "Tell me where you got it." I leaned in, letting my words drip with steady calm. "Your mistress gave it to me." His face paled. His throat tightened. He tried to shake his head, but I continued before he could form the denial. "She told me everything. How you promised her the same forever you once promised me. How you slipped that ring onto her finger, swearing it would soon be hers. How you laughed at me behind my back." He flinched at that last line, because it was true. I opened the folder and laid out the evidence again, slower this time, savoring every piece. Texts where he mocked me, photos of him holding her hand, recordings of her voice, giddy and proud, describing how his mother adored her and hated me. Each piece was a dagger, and I twisted each one with precision. His hands trembled as he reached for the box. "It's not what you think," he stammered. I made a mistake. She meant nothing. I love you." The words almost made me laugh. Almost. "Love?" I repeated, my voice laced with steel. "Is that what you call it? Love is what you whisper when you slip your mother's ring onto another woman's finger? Love is what you show when you strike me at our wedding in front of everyone you knew? Love is what you choose when you believe lies over the woman who trusted you with her life?" He tried to speak, but his voice faltered. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, trapped between the lies he wanted to tell and the truth choking him from inside. I pushed the box toward him. "This is proof," I said firmly. "Proof that your mother framed me. Proof that you helped her destroy me. Proof that every accusation, every whisper, every bruise I carried wasn't my shame, it was yours." His jaw clenched, his fists curled. For a moment, I thought he would explode, that the violence that lived in his veins would surface again. But instead, his shoulders sagged, the fight drained out of him, leaving only defeat. "You'll lose your job," I said coldly, sliding the documents back into the folder. "Your reputation, and when the divorce is finalized, you'll lose every penny you tried to keep from me. Everything you built will come crashing down, and the world will know who you really are." He stared at me, his eyes bloodshot, his breathing uneven. "Don't do this," he whispered. "Please, I need you." I tilted my head, studying him the way you study something fragile before it breaks. "You needed me when? When your mistress ran off with your money? When the lies you built crumbled in your hands? Or was it when you realized silence doesn't mean surrender? Tell me, when exactly did you need me? Because the last time I checked, you needed your mother more than you ever needed me." His face twisted, torn between shame and rage, but neither could save him now. For the first time, I felt no fear, no sadness, no guilt, only power. I stood, gathering the folder, the box, my resolve. "You destroyed yourself," I said softly, almost gently. "All I did was hold up the mirror." His voice cracked as he called after me, but I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. His desperation was a hollow echo, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. As I closed the door behind me, I realized something profound. The emerald ring, the accusations, the humiliation. They had been tools he and his mother used to break me. But in the end, those very tools became the proof of their destruction. And I was no thief. I was the lesson. The silence after he left wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't sharp or suffocating. It was liberating. For the first time in months, I felt free. The emerald box had been their weapon. Now, it was mine. When he walked out of my door that night, shoulders slumped and eyes hollow, I knew it was over. Not just our marriage, not just the shattered illusion of love, but the entire version of me that had once begged for scraps of his attention, that had once believed silence equaled peace, that had once mistaken humiliation for endurance. That woman no longer existed. What remained was someone new, someone forged in betrayal, humiliation, and pain, but also sharpened by clarity, strengthened by truth. The divorce came quickly after that. My lawyer, armed with the arsenal of evidence I had so carefully gathered, dismantled him piece by piece. The mistress's recordings, the texts, the photos, the bank statements, his mother's venomous admissions, they painted a portrait so damning there was no room for denial. His attempts at defense crumbled under the weight of proof. In the courtroom, he looked smaller than ever. Once, he had towered over me, fist raised, voice thundering. Now he sat hunched, muttering half-truths that no one believed. His reputation as a respectable man, a dutiful son, a loyal partner, all of it disintegrated in the harsh light of reality. His mother attended the hearings too, her eyes burning with the same hatred she had worn since the beginning. But even she couldn't save him. The recordings of her scheming, her words dripping with venom, destroyed her credibility. The very lies she had once wielded like a blade now cut into her own flesh. She sat in silence as the judge shook his head, as the evidence piled higher, as the world she thought she controlled collapsed around her. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to gloat. The truth was enough. When the verdict came, it wasn't just a legal win, it was vindication. The whispers that had once followed me everywhere now turned against them. The guests who had gasped at the wedding, who had whispered about my supposed theft, now whispered about his betrayal, his violence, his lies. The humiliation they had orchestrated for me had boomeranged back with brutal precision. But here's the thing about revenge. It doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle. It's in the way his colleagues stopped returning his calls, in the way his mother's friends avoided her at church, in the way he walked down the street and people turned away, unwilling to meet his eyes. That was the real revenge. Not rage, not destruction, but erasure. Watching them fade into irrelevance while I stood taller than I ever had before. And me? I didn't just survive, I thrived. The girl who once clung to promises became a woman who no longer needed them. The woman who once begged for love learned that dignity is worth more than devotion. The bride who once thought she lost everything discovered she had gained the only thing that truly mattered, herself. There's a strange freedom in losing what you thought you couldn't live without. When the chains fall, you realize they were never protection, they were prison bars. His fist, his mother's venom, the lies, the humiliation, they didn't define me. They revealed me. I learned that love without respect is poison, that silence can be a weapon when wielded with intent, that betrayal doesn't have to break you, it can refine you. Now, when I look back at that wedding, at the veil slipping from my head, at the flowers wilting in the silence, at the blood on my lips, I don't see the end, I see the beginning, because in that moment, I was no longer the girl walking down the aisle. I was the woman who would walk away stronger than ever. I wasn't the thief, I was the lesson, and he, his mother, the mistress, learned it too late. The irony still makes me smile sometimes. They tried to strip me of everything, to bury me in lies, to crush me under humiliation. Instead, they handed me the very tools I needed to rise. Their ring, their betrayal, their cruelty, they became my evidence, my power, my freedom. I lost a wedding, yes, but I gained something far greater. I gained myself.
And nothing, no ring, no promise, no man, will ever be more priceless than that.
In the end, I didn't just lose a wedding. I gained myself. His fists, his lies, and his mother's venom became the chains I broke free from. He thought he was destroying me, but all he did was set me free. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not anger, not violence, but becoming untouchable. Thank you for watching. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.